The next session is the UAE Champions panel, Renewal and Response, Opportunities for the UAE as the world emerges from COVID-19, moderated by Kelsey Warner, Future Editor, The National.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the Global Aerospace Summit's Local Champions panel. I'm Kelsey Warner, Future Editor at The National, where I oversee our coverage on all things cutting-edge tech and innovation. Today, we're talking about renewal and response during these unprecedented times. And joining me today is a lineup we're really privileged to bring together, representing aerospace, aviation, and connectivity. So please allow me to introduce His Excellency, Dr. Mohamed Alahbabi, the Director General of the UAE Space Agency, Ismail Abdulla, the Chief Executive Officer at Strata, and Suleiman Al-Ali, the Deputy Chief Executive Officer at Thuraya. Your Excellency, I would like to start with you, and let's take a step back and just reflect for a moment on, the pandemic has revealed on a global level some of our deepest vulnerabilities. And as you look back on what you've learned during this year, I'm wondering, has COVID changed the way the agency sees itself? Do you think it adds urgency to the way you'll engage with local players in particular?
Thanks, Kelsey. Probably, as I mentioned, before we try to answer the question, if you allow me to give an overview of UAE space program and the space agency and how it's adapted to the current situations. Probably, you know that UAE has, the largest space sector in the region with the language of numbers. The United Arab Emirates today own and operate 10 satellites in orbit. There are 7 satellites in projects. Around 22 or $6 billion have been invested in space activities. We have 3 operators, including Yasat and Thuraya, MBRC, and the NSSDC, which is a new center that's been established in UAE University, plus other 2 centers in UAE, in Khalifa University and Abu Dhabi University, New York Abu Dhabi University. We have a mission to Mars. We have astronaut program. We have completed our regulations in terms of policy, strategy, and law. We have engaged in international cooperation. We've been very active in the international space map. We also have a lot of activities and in the area of education awarenesses. In fact, UAE has become a regional hub for space events, space education. 3 of our local universities are providing space education. So the space agency or UAE government in 2014, has identified space as part of its current and future and decided to establish the space agency. So we were the first space agency in the region. The space agency is a small organization. We are a federal entity. We are coordinating, facilitating, and integrating, the whole space sector. We don't operate, we don't make satellite or buy satellites, but we, coordinate and facilitate the growth of the space sector. We are a small, agile, dynamic, forward-looking space agency. We call ourselves the space agency of the future. And when, in fact, COVID-19 came, we quickly adopted because we are small, we are agile. In fact, we look to it as an opportunity to, engage and also to facilitate some of the ideas, which is, to be adaptive, to be fast moving, and also to do distance working. We were very smooth process for us. In fact, productivity has been increased. And in fact, we also, the space sector globally and even regionally and locally has been impacted by COVID-19, but we try to unlock opportunities in this era.
Ismail and Suleiman, I'd like to extend the question to you. Do you think the pandemic has changed the way you will do business going forward, and particularly how you are engaging other local players?
If you allow me to start. Excellencies, friends and colleagues, good day. It's a pleasure to be on this esteemed panel. From our perspective, the situation with this pandemic continues to be fluid. the humanitarian, the economic, and the physical impact are of historic proportion. So as Dr. Mohamed said, companies need to be agile to respond to the current pandemic. Our shareholder, Mubadala Investment Company, launched a program called or an initiative called We Are Determined to support the communities around the world and also to support the first line of defenses, not only in the UAE, but also globally. What we have done at Strata is that we've teamed up with Honeywell, one of our long-standing partner, in order to see what can be done together. So we have established a production line for N95 masks, which are widely used during this pandemic. It is the first line of its kind here in the region, and with a throughput of 30 million masks. We have utilized the knowledge that Strata built over the past 10 years, the excellent infrastructure that we have, the excellent human workforce that we have. We've retrained them, we've repurposed the facility, and we've started. And all of this has been done within 30 days from initial discussion between Mubadala, Strata, and Honeywell. Usually such projects take actually a year or a year and a half. But we needed to respond quickly, and I'm glad to report that today our masks are being sold here in the UAE, also around the world. You can find our masks in Japan, Sri Lanka, the UK, and also other places around the world.
Suleiman, would you like to, thank you, Ismail, pick up that question of reflecting on the pandemic and how it's changed your engagement and your sense of the company's role for this country?
Thank you very much for having us today, and I think I concur to what Dr. Mohamed Alahbabi and colleague Ismail have already mentioned about how the country and how the sector is agile in the UAE, and how the plans were already going according to the long-term vision of the UAE to the sector. I think the agility was one of the main factors that worked great for the industry in UAE, and the example that my colleague Ismail gave for how they changed and they were able to maneuver around the current situation to come up with the new solutions and how they can really use and benefit from the capabilities they have. This is one of the examples, and we can see also the commitment of the UAE to the long-term vision that we have, where we saw that the Hope Probe was launched on time, and we can see that Thuraya and Yasat already announced the program for T4 and new satellites that is coming with a new feature in the future. So that all shows that we are lean, we are really we have our tactical moves, and this give us new ideas and new ways to do business where we did not thought about it previously. But in general, I think it was really a key learning point in the career that we have, and in the way that we will do business in the future.
So staying agile and sticking to deadlines. And Your Excellency, as Suleiman said, during this time, the UAE has become the first in the Arab world to undertake an interplanetary mission, sending the Hope probe to Mars. So as with any space endeavor these days, partnerships have been critical. So what workarounds did the space agency have to navigate to launch and now maintain this mission?
Well, it's space is all about cooperation, locally, regionally, and internationally. It's in our hearts as a space agency. We do most of our programs and our initiatives based on partnership with academia, with the private sector, with the government locally, but also with space agencies and institutions around the world. And the merit of partnership is because space is high risk, high cost, takes a lot of time, and also required very high skills. So the best way to mitigate all these is through partnership. And this is what we do, especially with Emirates Mars mission, the Hope probe. was not in the plan. But eventually we mitigated that risk, and we our partnership with the support from the government. As you know, we launched from Japan, and airlines was stopped, no traveling. But with determination from the team who works in this project, especially the team in MBRC, we managed to launch on time. As you know, launching to Mars is limited and restricted as well, because there is a window. You have to launch, otherwise you have to wait 2 years. But again, through partnership, through coordination, and the space community, in fact, they are very supportive. They are very close, and because they do believe in something bigger. And thanks to all our friends and colleagues in JAXA, Japanese Space Agency, even Russian Space Agency, because we carried the Emirates Mars mission on Russian Antonov, but also through different space agencies, different networks. We managed to launch on time. And this is just an example of, in spite of the difficulties and challenges, with determination, things can be achieved.
Ismail, you mentioned briefly the Honeywell tie-up and the N95. So from the HOPE probe to local manufacturing. So Strata was at the center of that story a few months ago, a few months into the pandemic. And that news story, it took my breath away, because it brought home to me what sort of kind of agility was needed to tackle the pandemic. So in May, Strata's production line in LA, in collaboration with Honeywell, began to produce N95 masks. So Ismail, I'm curious, what did that teach you? And does Strata have other health technology interests in the pipeline?
The most important lesson that we have, and we keep learning through this pandemic, is to be agile, quick to respond, and also utilize the existing capabilities that you have to address critical needs for the country first, and then worldwide. We started with one product, so our diversification into personal protective equipment started with this N95. We are considering, and we are working with a number of government entities to see what are the other critical needs in terms of either PPE, in terms of medical devices, that we can utilize our existing footprint here. We might tie up with someone and to start producing, not only to fulfill the requirement for the local market and address the market here in the UAE, but also for the region and for the world. It's extremely important right now, as the situation continues to be fluid, the situation continues to be dynamic, is to reinvent yourself. Look at what are your core strengths and try to utilize these core strengths to pivot into areas that are also will benefit from your core strength. You can start manufacturing new stuff.
So Suleiman, I want to bring it to you. Leave it to Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos in recent months to bring satellites into the news cycle. The satellite industry is facing an inflection point, in part driven by what we've realized about the importance of virtual connections during the pandemic. So Suleiman, I'm curious, where does Thuraya fit into an increasingly competitive environment? And what role do you play in the evolution of the aerospace industry? It's a space that there's just a ton of innovation happening right
now. I think the pandemic, we learned from this pandemic that connectivity is really critical. This was known to us before, but during this pandemic, we saw that if you don't have connectivity, if you are not digitalized, then you will be disconnected from the world. The whole world was set to home during this pandemic, and we saw the soldiers of the front line being in the medical sector, being in the front line. But the soldiers that we did not saw are the guys who are working on the connectivity. We have a lot of teams around the world. We're going to provide connectivity to different sectors within different countries. We have connected a lot of remote clinics in South Africa using Yaklik connectivity. With Thuraya, we pushed our channels and we pushed our suppliers to provide us with everything on time to keep providing our customer with the connectivity that they needed. Without that part available to our end user in this really tough time, we could have a lot of people staying away and not connected. Our Thuraya product, we have a plan usually to keep a lot of stock in different areas in the region where we are serving our customer. So that helped us. The strategic planning of stocking and providing the channels with the product helped us on reaching to our customer even in this tough time. So we learned that if you are pre-equipped and you are having the pre-planned for whatever obstacles that will come, you will be able to achieve the goal and really keep the world connected. We see that with the announcement of the T4, which is the new satellite, that we are bringing new capabilities to the market. We are bringing a new throughput, new products, being for the government sector or for the commercial or individual users. So that shows that we, as Thuraya or Yasat, are trying to really push hard to be at the edge of technology and really compete in the market that is really evolving day on day. And we can see a lot of competition that is coming from different sectors, being from the LEO, that is really coming really hard in the market, and they have very aggressive plans. But if you look at it from Thuraya's point of view and Yasat's point of view, today we have acquired, let's say, a full portfolio of product, being in C-band, Ka band, Ku band, and now with Thuraya we have the L band. So we are really having a competitive advantage being in the market with all that portfolio.
Ismail, I wanted to dig in a little bit more to how the UAE found ways to support customers facing disruptions to supply chains. Can you talk a little bit more about how aerospace businesses can further future-proof going forward and play a role in these moments?
Today, thank you, Kelsey. Today, if you read any trade magazine that speaks about aerospace, the news are usually negative because of the pandemic, because of the lockdown. So let me concentrate about the next decade or two, 10, 20 years from now. The fundamentals of the aerospace industry are very strong. Over the next 20, 25 years, we are expecting anywhere between 30 to 40,000 aircrafts to be sold. This is driven by the fact that we have more and more people moving from low-income segments to mid-income segment. Previously, travel was beyond luxury, was not attainable. Now it's becoming more attainable in areas like, or in countries like China and India. This means that OEMs needs to manufacture, needs to address the new demand through having the supply to cater for this demand. In the future, we might not continue to see the duopoly between Airbus and Boeing. We might see over the next decade or two, probably 1 to 2 new entrants. The Chinese are working with their Comac 919 and the Russians on their MC-21. I believe China has a great opportunity, especially with the captive market that they have. This means that the aircraft that I mentioned are single-aisle aircraft, which means that we might move from the hub-to-hub model today to point-to-point model. My belief is that the jury is still out. There is no reason why both models for airlines cannot coexist. However, the jury has decided that for the future, there are a number of key requirements from airlines for these OEMs. Number one, the acquisition cost, so a reasonable or a lower acquisition cost, a lower maintenance cost, and most importantly, a more sustainable aircraft. What does that mean? That translates into we probably gonna see over the next decade, and so some landscape realignment. We're gonna see vertical integration. We're gonna see horizontal integration within the industry. The creation of super tier ones, not only to enhance efficiency, to enhance quality and throughput, but also to have the right means to invest in technology, to invest in digitization. What my colleague Sulaiman referred to, it's extremely important, the digital transformation, investing in robotics, and from our perspective, investing in artificial intelligence and high speed computing. This will ensure that the supply chain, and so the supply side and the demand side is connected. Today we have what we call a web pool effect. Anytime there is a high demand or there is a low demand, so a positive impact or a negative impact, the supply chain either cannot respond in a timely fashion, or they have an overstock. By using AI, by using high computer processing, we will have real data that can be shared along the value chain. From a sustainability perspective, I believe that alternative jet fuel could be used in the future, such as biofuel. From my perspective, electrification and using electricity to run aircraft, I believe we will not be seeing something that is used widely for intercontinental and even regional flights. We could see some niche addressable market for such aircrafts. That takes me to another point, urban mobility. I believe that within the next decade or so, we will be seeing finally the third dimension being used. Today, when you look at transport has two dimensions and has been so for a long time. By using the third dimension, I believe that traffic jams will ease in mega cities. I don't have a crystal ball. I have to say this caveat. I don't have a crystal ball, but these are some of the highlights, okay, and broad lines that will shape the future of the aerospace industry one way or another. Most importantly, I would like to stress again, this is a long-term industry. It's not short-term. Yes, we do have an issue right now that might last for 3 to 5 years. However, long-term, it looks very good.
Your Excellency, kind of to dovetail on that, I'm curious from your perspective, what does the UAE need more of, or what existing resources can we be taking even greater advantage of to increase local people and skills in aerospace? Where are you seeing opportunities to collaborate in building centers for research and development?
If we look to UAE space sector today, in the last 6-7 years, we have put all the infrastructure when it comes to regulation, institutions. So now we are kind of moving to the next stage, which is building the space economy for sustainability. The future is different than yesterday. Governments used to fund space projects. Today we see the private sector is stepping in. You mentioned SpaceX. In the past only governments launch satellites, but today it's the companies. And I think the trend will continue like this for efficiency and cost effectiveness. And now we are focusing basically on that domain, how to facilitate and how to activate space economy within UAE. I think we have the ingredients, we have the infrastructure, we have everything, we have the probably right environment regionally at least to attract investors in space. And we try to through different programs and initiatives to show the benefits of investment in space, locally, regionally, and internationally. On the regional level, actually, we are leading through a number of initiatives, especially the Arab Space Cooperation Group, which is an initiative that to bring Arab countries together in order to activate space activities. We managed to work together with, now we have 14 countries, part of that organization. We work closely with different countries in the region to help them to establish their space programs. So the market will be in the region will be significant because there is a lot of interest in space activities. We see a number of satellites being launched, space agencies established in Saudi Arabia and Bahrain and Egypt and Nigeria, and more to come. I think the future is to have a niche for space in the global space market. And we have, in fact, we look to the other sectors. The space has no difference. We have an opportunity, and now we are working with local stakeholders, especially the private sector, to activate and make UAE the best destination when it comes to space investment.
When you think about space economies, what are the most compelling areas to focus on these days for the UAE Space Agency?
Well, if we look to the international trends, the focus now on commercialization, small satellites. So instead of a big satellites, constellations is there. Startup companies, new innovations launching. There's more than, I heard in the last report, there's more than 100 companies around the world try to launch satellites. So access to space, I think it's an area. Technologies when it comes to AI and these new revolutions when it comes to digital age. I think that there is a great opportunities, and this is where we are working and planning. In fact, last year we issue what we called space investment promotion strategy, where we work closely with the local entities and funding agencies within the country, and also from the regulation perspective to make UAE attractive when it comes to space. So even we work closely with Mubadala on some initiatives. We work closely with other free zones, if you like, just to attract more space investment to the country. And this is, I think, is the future, and also will provide more sustainability to the program, more opportunities for local people to engage and to establish their own business, and also to gain knowledge.
Sulaiman, I'm curious to get your perspective on, for the laggards in the aerospace industry, why are some companies still not leveraging the digital era to their advantage? What are some of the barriers to digitalization these days?
I think some of the companies, or let's say most of the companies, have already adapted to the new digitalization of the industry. There are few who, let's say, were not ready and did not build the right infrastructure to be prepared for the move and to the change in the industry. But we can see that a lot of companies that they have already adopted the digitalization, and we felt that during the pandemic, where all the operations changed from physical to digital operation methods. We saw a lot of companies have really changed, and there was a smooth transaction from the physical to the digital movement. I think the proper planning and having the right strategy and having the right infrastructure, that will help you always on moving to the digitalization. And we can see that that's just something that most of the companies that they learned with this pandemic, and it will be something that will change the way the industry will operate and work in the future. I will just tell you an example that we have within Thuraya and Viasat. The transaction from physical to digital modes of working was really smooth, because there was an infrastructure and the plan that was put previously, and we have that, let's say, technology installed, and everything was ready. So when the time came to change, all the changes during the pandemic was to turn to digital, even the transaction of money, the meetings and supply chain, everything moved to the digital world. And that shows that, yes, if you have something that you really prepared yourself, being in the space industry, we always have to be ready. We always have redundancy sites. All of these things are running around, the digital world that all the industry need to adopt in the future.
Okay, I would be remiss as the future editor if I didn't ask you all about the disruptions in aerospace that are keeping you up at night. It's a time of rapid change. So what are the solutions in sustainability, or what are the emerging opportunities that you're really excited about these days? Suleiman, we can start with you.
Areas that is really exciting in the industry of satellite is the IoT industry. It is really picking up, and it is really something that will really add a lot of benefit. And also adding to the point of going and digitalizing our most of our operation, the IoT will really help in a lot of aspects in this sector. If we go specifically to, let's say, the aero industry, the IoT that is connected to the satellite will help, the spacecraft, that will help also the airlines to really reduce a lot of cost that they are having today. They will have, the IoT device will be transmitting over satellite to the ground operation center. What is the status of the airplane? What are the things that need to be serviced? All the information that they need to prepare everything on the ground when the airplane land, then they will do the work quickly. So that will save them cost of grounding the airplane, and also the operation will be easier. And another also area is the cockpit communication, which we see that a lot of incidents happen in the industry. That missing the information and keeping the continuous communication with the airplane will lead to some gap in understanding what happened to the airplane and where the communication stopped. So satellite is really a critical infrastructure for communication that will help in providing safer and also better future for other industries, and especially using IoT. And in the T4 program that we are working on, we are really focusing on these aspects of IoT, where we can use it in agricultural, in industrial, in oil and gas, and also in aerospace.
Ismail, would you like to pick up this question?
Sure, Kelsey. From our perspective, back in 2015, we understood the importance of differentiating ourselves from our competitors. We have established a research and technology arm that looks into investment in areas where we believe that will shape the future of our industry. So for example, we are looking at digitalization, we are looking at additive manufacturing, we are looking at IoT, and from our perspective, these are some of the opportunities that will shape the future of our industry. For example, additive manufacturing, 3D printing. There is a lot of hype about it. Still, it's yet to have a real breakthrough in our industry. And once it does that, there will be a huge shift in the current manufacturing footprint. So this is something that we are closely working on. From a digitalization perspective, what we have done is that we have invested in a digitalization roadmap. So every year, what are the manual processes that we want to automate, also not only on the admin side, but also on the shop floor. What are the programs that we would like to invest in robotics? So to change the mandrolic work into a robotic work. Now, having said that, it's extremely important to address a very important question. By robotizing or digitalization, are we actually removing jobs? I think the answer is no. Some jobs will be lost, some jobs will be created. It could be a zero sum game. But today the industry is going through a lot of changes and exciting times.
Your Excellency, earlier this month, the UAE and Israel signed a historic peace accord, ushering in new economic opportunities for both nations. And we're talking today about renewal and recovery and where the opportunities are. So I'm wondering, from your perspective, what this accord represents to the UAE, and what is the sense of opportunity for technology and commercial cooperation?
Well, it's a great move, I think, and when it comes to space, As I mentioned, the space is all about cooperations, no borders when it comes to space. In the past, we see countries, you know, they have some differences, but they work together in space. And a good example is Russia and US, and it's the same actually across all the region. Now with this new environment, I think there's a potential for space cooperation, and we are looking forward to facilitate and activate that in the near future.
So, in spite of the pandemic, or perhaps even alongside the pandemic, the UAE has had many triumphs this year, opening the Baraka nuclear power plant, sending the Hope probe up, as we talked about, and signing of the Abraham Accord. It's been a year of just many major headlines, and each year the UAE has a theme. This year is preparing for the next 50 years. And so as we kind of hold the pandemic in tension with all of the accomplishments of the UAE this year, how would you each like to remember 2020? Your Excellency, I'd like to start with you.
Well, I mean, it's very difficult year when it comes to COVID-19. But at the same time, for us, we, as mentioned last night, actually in the White House by His Highness Sheikh Abdullah, you know, he mentioned the Hope probe, and also the astronaut program, and also Baraka, you know, project, as examples of UAE determination in the light of COVID, and the light of challenges, and the light of difficulties that our region going through. I think this is a culture. This is UAE. It's the country of impossibility. Everything is possible with determination. I think we have a vision. We have a strategy, roadmap, clear roadmap, and we have the talents and people who can execute with confidence.
Suleiman, would you like to pick that question up? How would you like 2020 to be remembered for the UAE?
The bad side of it, of people who got really, who died because of this COVID-19 in UAE and around the world, and the people who really suffered from this pandemic. But I think it was a learning point for everybody, and it was a learning point for us also in the industry, that the plans, the pre-plans, all the strategies that the government have put previously, it paid on this critical time. So for me, I think this year is really a learning year, and a year that it really shows how we are confident about the plans that the government is putting and the way we can move forward. So if we pass this tough year with these kind of massive achievements, I will say, then the coming years will have more and more to come when the things are easy.
Ismail, you'll get the final word here. How will Strata be remembering 2020?
One of the best advices that I've received in my life is, what's life without the challenge? This year has been extremely challenging, but also extremely rewarding. We were able to test our resilience. We were able to test our character. And most importantly, we were able to test our credibility. When we say that we are going to deliver on this day, we have to deliver, and we will do everything that is possible to deliver. A small example, a very small example from Strata's perspective. We have launched Strata Plus, which is the new home for the vertical fin of the 787 program. We have launched this program and we started manufacturing virtually. So we have Strata's team here in Al Ain, you have the Boeing's team back in Seattle and Salt Lake City, and it was done for the first time virtually. So from our perspective, it's about credibility. It's about, keep pushing on your promises and delivery. Yes, 2020 is a challenging year, but this country, the United Arab Emirates, was actually built with a lot of blood, with a lot of sweat from the founding fathers. And what we are trying to do is that we are trying to continue the momentum. The Hope probe, the word hope was actually selected for a reason, because the UAE is a beacon of hope for this region.
Gentlemen, it was a wide-ranging conversation. I really just appreciate your time and sharing your wisdom, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Kelsey. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelsey.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the Global Aerospace Summit's Local Champions panel. We have a special one-to-one conversation with Khalid Al Breiki, President of Mission Support Cluster at EDGE. Khalid, thank you for being here. It's good to meet you. Let's get into it.
Thank you very much, Kelsey. It's good to meet you. Thank you very much.
Khalid, EDGE was a relative newcomer to the UAE when the pandemic began. Just a month before the lockdown went into effect, EDGE's subsidiary Adasi announced it would be producing a drone locally. It was among the first public announcements from EDGE, and it was a first for the UAE. I'm wondering if you can tell me a bit more about the status of that project, but also, has the pandemic actually added any urgency to localizing production in other parts of EDGE's business? Like, how are you thinking about this these days?
Sure. So I think that from the start, I mean, the mandate for EDGE is to really to disrupt and to bring the real capabilities to the country here and to deliver to the aerospace sector and the defense and security as well. I think we couldn't wish for any bigger challenge than COVID-19 itself then. No one has planned for this. No one saw that it was coming. It challenged, I think, the whole industry across the world. Luckily enough, from the going forward, technology was our backbone. From the beginning, we knew that we are a high-tech organization. We need to leverage every bit of technology and capability that we have, that we know of, that is going to be embraced by the world. And actually that helped us to continue moving on. We didn't stop, not even one day in our value, in all our companies. We continue to deliver upon our promise. We are still delivering our services, and we still plan to deliver according to our mandate and the direction that we has been set forth from the beginning.
So, kind of along that same line, Khalid, I'm wondering, Gulf countries are increasingly producing and procuring military equipment locally, sort of signaling a ground shift, a disruption, as you said earlier. Tech transfers and commitments to produce and buy equipment locally have become key. Back in July, EDGE acquired the remaining stake in its military maintenance company, AMROC, from Lockheed Martin. Are you planning other transactions? Are there other transactions like this in the pipeline? How are you thinking about this, kind of continuing along the same theme of localization?
Sure. So if you look at it, to do disruptive, to come in with a disruptive mandate requires you to think in a classic manner, but also think in a big picture approach. Organic growth is always going to be there, but also sometimes we need to go fast and acquire certain capabilities. So yes, we're mixing up between our mandate to consolidate our industry locally here so that we have clear focus on what we're delivering, what we're going to be acquiring as a country, and what we're going to be delivering internally here in the UAE. So the mandate of EDGE is really to consolidate our efforts, our focus, our resources, in order to deliver upon 1, 2, 3 different objectives that we've been set by the industry itself, by our board. The idea of acquiring different companies or acquiring different capabilities is always there. As I mentioned, it goes hand to hand with disruptive approach. You cannot always rely on organic growth to go slowly or systemically. You need to have it in your core. In order to have a very capable and flexibility to deliver service, you need to have very solid core. So we are in our daily operations, we are doing everything as you can say by the book, but we always aspire to challenge the norm. We always aspire to bring something new. On constant basis, almost on weekly basis, we have meetings internally with the leadership team that, okay, what are we doing that requires to be revised? How can we do better and better? So yes, you're going to see a lot of those consolidations. You're going to see a lot of maybe acquisition as well. because the industry itself demands that we do that. I mean, there are new players coming to this industry that were never there before. Never have we seen in the industry, in defense industry perspective, the highly engaged IT companies or high technology companies or even startups that they have a role in our industry right now. They haven't been there before, and right now we see them over there. So across the board, actually, the industry is shifting, and the capability to acquire know-how and deliver is also is becoming easily approached, but with focus and dedication.
When you think about the theme of disruption, talking about high-tech companies getting into the market, startups thinking that they can be defense companies or becoming defense company startups entering the marketplace, what sort of disruptions are you looking at that are exciting you these days? Is it autonomous vehicles? Is it robotics and manufacturing? What are some of the things keeping you up at night or even that intrigue you from an investment perspective?
So let's divide that into two sectors. Number one is the current pandemic. What are we doing about it? In order to, previously, about maybe 6 months ago, we were saying that economically, in order to be ahead of the game, you need to embrace digitization. Right now, actually, it's a ticket to the game. If you delay even one day, you're behind. And it becomes, as I just mentioned, I mean, look at how we are meeting each other right now. It's virtual. It's becoming really the norm right now. We hope this is not going to stay for so long as the COVID-19, but it gave us lessons that we never thought that we will be ever go through them. We are challenging even the way that we go to office every day. Do we need even to do that? We are challenging even the job families that we have. Which ones require to be at office, which ones don't require to be at office? And everything that we do from that perspective. But also from the high-tech industry, the operational scenario has changed. Let me put it that way. That demand even the value chain itself to adapt. Now, you've seen many different international countries, or let us say countries across the world, they're challenging their concept of operation in the defense sector. That demanded that the industry itself focus on how to address that kind of change in the operational scenario. And to do that, you have no choice but to go beyond just the normal classical defense industry. The disruption when it comes to technology right now, what we witnessed is mostly happening in the high-tech industry, which is classically in the past haven't been there before. But it's a systemic approach. It's systems of systems, and then how that's going to be integrated from a value chain perspective. So yes, maybe you're going to see newcomers, but they're not alone. They have to work with the classical defense companies in order to bring the value together. So I don't think in the near future we're going to have one solid company that can do everything by themselves. But it's really a combination of the classical companies that have been always there in the defense and the newcomers and what they can bring together. And that's going to be a very interesting thing to see.
Defense spending has so far been fairly insulated from the market turmoil of 2020 that we've seen so far. Do you expect that dynamic to change at all?
We expect a different approach to the defense spending, which is, I just highlighted before, it depends on the operational scenarios and what's happening over there, and what that has dictated the industry to shift its focus on. In aerospace sector, we've seen the commercial side got the biggest hit. I think prior to the pandemic itself, we believe that the aviation sector in general would have contributed about $53 billion, which is about 194.5 billion dirhams. I don't think that's still the same by 2020. I don't think that's the same. It's way below right now. On the other side, though, that was on the commercial side that took the biggest hit. On the defense sector, it didn't slow up that much. It just shifted the focus because the national interest to protect its sovereignty, the country to protect their sovereignty, to protect their security is always there. It never shifted, even on the pandemic. I think the demand is even more, but the classification of the demand that has changed. The kind of capabilities that are required versus what has been thought previously has changed. And with that, also the economy of scale.
As you think about what you've learned from the pandemic this year and what the UAE has done, how will you remember 2020? What have you learned from this year?
I think it's a very interesting question. We have embraced the spirit of our leadership. that nothing is impossible. And I think this pandemic just put that, the will and the spirit into test. And I think we as a nation, together with the industry itself, we embraced the spirit that our leadership had. And we took this as a challenge, how we can continue to deliver. How can we embrace the new challenges? How to aspire even to things that previously we've been told that you cannot do it. You'll never be able to do it. And with the same spirit that has been invested, as I said, that in our country and us as a generation, that either leading the industry right now or actually the new generation that's coming in, I think it's exciting on one side of it, even with the tragic consequences on the humanitarian side, but from the industry, from the technology, from the challenge and the ability to deliver and to take what has been told us before that it cannot be done, is an ability for us to deliver and to enjoy that we can reach there and we can do what has been done, but has been deemed to be impossible. As I said, the impact of the COVID-19 is not going to stay for 2020. I think the real challenge and the real impact is going to take at least 3 years even to really digest and to understand whether that economically, how that has impacted us, technologically, how that has shifted our mindset, our working style, our ability to adapt to new technologies. I think it impacted even beyond the industry itself. I mean, even students right now, they take education at home. The parents, they start balancing how to teach their children, at the same time also to work. Before, it's almost like, no, you cannot do that. Right now, I can have this meeting with you and actually I'm still here at home. And previously, without this COVID-19, this has been like, no, you cannot do that. Right now, it's an acceptable thing. And with that, it means that you're gonna save time. You're gonna be more efficient when it comes to ability to deliver. And it saves you precious time that for you to think and to act accordingly. 2020, it's gonna have two different flags. One of them is very sad from humanitarian side of it. And the other one was really very optimistic at what human nature can do when it's challenged globally. Yet to be witnessed for the next even 3 years to come.
Thank you so much for taking this time to talk to me today. It's been really interesting.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I'm here with Mansoor Janahi, Deputy Group Chief Executive Officer for Sanad. Mansoor, the pandemic has revealed at a global level some of our deepest vulnerabilities. And as you reflect on what you've learned during this year, how has COVID-19 changed the way that Sanad does business? And particularly, what will it change about the way you engage with other players and local stakeholders in the future?
Thank you, Ed. If you look at the COVID-19 crisis, it by far is the most challenging crisis that our aviation industry has ever gone through. But I'm very proud to say that at Sanad, we have always been looking at our strategy over the long term and assessing what are the key elements of our strategy. So in reflection of the challenges that we've seen being brought to us by COVID-19, I'm very proud to say that our investments that we've made since 2018 in technology, our investments that we've made in creating a local supply chain, our investments that we've made in creating a local workforce has really allowed us to weather this difficult time period in a successful manner. I think another key reflection point for us, as you know, we have been limited by travel. The management team has been put here in Abu Dhabi. We've invested in tools where we're communicating with our customers and our supply chain, but it has also given us time as well to look at other areas in the business. So I think in reflection, yes, COVID has been challenging. But I'm very proud that in Sanad we've invested in a number of areas that has allowed us to weather this challenge in a better way. In terms of engaging with our local customers, I think nothing will change and nothing has changed. If anything, with Sanad's focus on the customer being number one, the local clientele should see even a better service from Sanad.
And alongside the experiences of the last few months, Sanad's also been going through a consolidation and an evolution of your leadership team very recently. Can you talk a bit more about what the objectives of this new structure are and what it means for the way that you're going to be shaping your business as we move forward?
So for us, this has been part of a journey that which I'm sure you've seen over the past year, to create through the consolidation, to create a global champion and an industrial services champion that spearheads Mubadala's aerospace services businesses. So for me, the consolidation creates also more opportunities and a better service for our end user or the customer. And I'll give you a very simple example. Today, the Sanad portfolio consists of 2 MRO businesses, Sanad Aerotech and Sanad PowerTech, and a financing and leasing business called Sanad Capital. So with this, what the customer will be seeing is they're going to be seeing more offerings. They're going to be also seeing a single channel of communication, whether it's a financing solution or whether it's an MRO solution. So for me, so it basically goes back to 2 points: creating a global power or a global champion, plus providing better opportunities for the customer and the market.
And you mentioned, obviously, the ways that you're looking at supporting customers in more depth, and you touched in the first point on the supply chain, and particularly when customers are faced by maintenance, spare parts, supply chain companies shutting down. Obviously, there's been a lot of impacts that are kind of out of the control directly of the Sanad business. How can you work on future-proofing your business going forward in that context?
So and we take business continuity, even prior to the pandemic, something as very serious in our strategy. So when the pandemic started, our business continuity was immediately activated at every level. In addition, we look at data through our research and technology and research and development team, where we've been investing in tools to help us better plan for events like these. So what we did is right at the start of the pandemic, we engaged with all of our key suppliers. We looked at geographies that were impacted by lockdowns, and we planned ahead well in advance. So it was a combination of our business continuity plans, which was through engagement with our supply chain, plus then more of a data-driven type of a decision-making through some of the technology schemes and that we have, and some of the initiatives that we've undertaken as a business.
It's interesting, but obviously
one more point, Ed, which I would like to add. I'm very proud to say that during this pandemic, we did not have a single day where our operations were disrupted. So, and that by itself for us is something that we're extremely proud of. Yes, there were elements where we had to ensure that the supply chain was intact, to ensure that parts were available to build engines, but at the same time, how we structured our operations, our workforce, to continue delivering engines and services to our global customer base.
And leading on from the workforce that you mentioned just there, obviously, tools and data are one thing, but the human skills and the capacity of the UAE are another part that's important here. Can you talk a little bit more about what the UAE needs more of, what existing resources you can take greater advantage of them already doing to increase kind of local peoples and the skills and engineering opportunities in aerospace within the country, and also perhaps what the opportunities are to collaborate with building centres for research and development with other stakeholders in the UAE.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at where our industry is moving, and I think the COVID-19 crisis or pandemic has been a great proof point that technology is a winner, and technology is going to continue to being a driving force in how our industry is going to move. So for us, definitely, we are going to continue to invest in research and development. And the way we look at research or invest in research and development is we work with our existing partners. These are the OEMs. And we work as well with academia. So we work with the likes of the Aerospace Research and Innovation Center and Khalifa University. And our view is that this is going to be an area that we will continue to invest in. What we also are working with is what does this new workforce look like? Now with more of a focus on digitalization, a focus on artificial intelligence, even the requirements for us as a business, needing an output of people with these skill sets is also something that we're seeing coming out more and more. But I think on the flip side, being a business that is based out of Abu Dhabi, we are quite lucky with the visionary leadership that we have here in the UAE and the leadership in areas of artificial intelligence and technology. So I think it needs more communication and more coordination, but I think the infrastructure is well in place here in Abu Dhabi and the UAE.
So Mansoor, you mentioned AI in your last answer, but it'd be good to get an idea of some of the other areas in the digital arena that make you most excited. What are the programs that you think are going to have the biggest impact, both within Sanad and also drive change more widely within the aerospace sector as we move forward?
So Ed, like I mentioned, we have a dedicated research and development team that works with our partners and works as well internally with the various teams that we have. Currently, the two areas where we have got most of our projects on is on the digitalization front, where we're looking across our engine MRO workshops by introducing digital tools. So that's one area that we are heavily looking at. Another area that we're looking at is, and we believe is going to be game-changing in the future as well, not just for our business, but across the sector, is predictive analytics and the use of smart analytics to allow us making better decisions and to also help us plan better. So for example, how can we use predictive analytics to help our customers plan their maintenance events better? The last area, which I think is more specific to our business, is the introduction of what we call high-tech repairs. We obviously, on our engine MRO business, that's one area we are working with our research and technology team by introducing new high-tech repairs that will allow us again by being more effective in our turnaround times.
Excellent. Well, Mansoor, I'd like to thank you for your time today. I know that later on we have some presentations from your team around some of these digitalization technologies. So hopefully we can share with the audience in a bit more depth some of the work that you guys have been doing. But as things stand, thank you very much. Good luck for the future, and we appreciate your time today.
Thank you.